My name is Shella Conklin. I am 29 years old. Just 3 weeks ago, at my sister's wedding, a grand $120,000 affair held at an estate in Los Altos Hills with 200 guests, my parents seated me at table 25. I was placed next to the wedding planner's 9-year-old son and 4 other children under 12. My place card read, Ms. Mella Conklin. They even misspelled my name. There was no profession listed under it either. Everyone else's card displayed a prestigious title, like Dr. Martinez, cardiologist, Mr. Cooper, director at Google, or Miss Patterson, senior VP at Salesforce. Mine only had a misspelled name, as if I had never accomplished a single thing in my life. My mother, sitting at the head table raised 6 inches above the rest of the room, waved at me while holding her 3rd glass of champagne. She shouted across the tent, loud enough for half the reception to hear, "Shella, at least you got a plate." A few people laughed, hesitant and polite, while others quickly looked away. What none of them knew was that I had explicitly asked for table 25. 2 weeks prior, I texted the wedding planner, Susan Callahan, requesting that exact spot because I knew exactly who else would be sitting there. And I knew exactly what would happen when that 9-year-old boy asked one simple question. Before I tell you what happened next, if you have ever been relegated to the metaphorical table 25 by your own family, dismissed and made to feel invisible despite everything you have achieved, take a quick second to like this video and subscribe. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from, and if you have ever felt unrecognized by the people closest to you. I read every single comment. Now let me tell you what actually happened that night. Let us step back a moment. My sister Natalie is 26. She is a product manager at Google, making $210,000 a year plus stock options. She graduated from Stanford in 2021 with a computer science degree, finishing summa cum laude. When she got her job offer, our parents threw a party for 60 people. They rented out a restaurant in Palo Alto and posted 17 times on Facebook. I am 29. I teach special education at the Los Altos Community Center, earning $82,000 a year. I graduated from Stanford in 2019 with a degree in psychology. I also finished summa cum laude, the exact same honor as Natalie. When I got my job offer, our parents hosted a small family dinner for 12 people. There were 0 posts on Facebook. The difference was not our honors or even our school, it was the path we chose. Natalie chose Google, big tech, prestige, and stock options. That was a career path our parents understood, something they could brag about at dinner parties in Los Altos Hills, where everyone's child works at Meta or Apple, or is launching a startup. I chose the children who could not speak yet, the ones who could not hold a pencil, the ones whose parents could never afford $300 an hour private therapy. My parents viewed my choice as an embarrassment. At first, they did not say it to my face, but 2 months after I started, in December 2019, I came home for Christmas and overheard my mother on the kitchen phone with her sister. "Natalie is doing incredibly well in computer science at Stanford," she said. "She will be making 6 figures right out of school." There was a pause. "Shella? Oh, she is working with special needs kids at a community center." Another, longer pause followed. "I know, I do not get it either. All that money for a Stanford education just to make $68,000. She had no idea I was standing in the hallway, or perhaps she did. That was 7 years ago, and the erasure began quietly. Every year on the family Christmas card, my name grew smaller. By 2023, I was left out of the family photo entirely. Natalie claimed the photographer ran out of time, even though we had been standing there for 40 minutes. At family dinners, my mother always introduced Natalie first. Every single time. "This is Natalie, our daughter who works at Google. She just led a product launch for 3 million users." Then she would pause and glance at me. "And this is Shella." No title, no achievements, just my name, like a minor footnote. In some ways, my father was even harder to take. He did not erase me, he quantified me. "You are wasting a Stanford degree teaching toddlers to finger paint," he told me at a restaurant in Los Altos in August 2020. He had ordered a $150 bottle of wine to celebrate Natalie's first promotion. I had just shared a breakthrough about a 6-year-old girl named Lucia. Nonverbal her entire life, after 8 weeks of working together, she finally spoke her very first words. "Water, please." My father set his glass down and said, "That is nice, Shella, but you could be making real money with that degree. Natalie's base salary is already up to $140,000. I did not argue. By then, I had learned that debating only made things worse. I simply smiled, nodded, and changed the subject. But from that day forward, I never mentioned my work to them again. Here is what I never told them. In June 2019, 2 weeks before graduation, I volunteered at a community center in East Palo Alto. It was a Saturday morning, and I was assisting with a reading program. There was an 8-year-old nonverbal girl named Lucia who had level 3 autism. Her mother worked 2 jobs and could not afford therapy. The center provided free programs run by volunteers. I spent 6 weeks that summer tutoring Lucia, just the 2 of us, twice a week for 30 minutes. I used picture cards, hand-over-hand physical guidance, and functional communication training. On the last day of August, Lucia looked at me and said, "Thank you, Teacher Shella." 4 words, clear and intentional. Her mother cried. I cried. The center director cried. That was the day I made my decision. I could have gone to graduate school, spent another 6 years taking on $200,000 in debt, earned a PhD in clinical psychology, and opened a private practice in Palo Alto counseling adults on their careers and relationships. Or I could start immediately, helping children who needed support right now, instead of making them wait 6 years. Lucia could not wait 6 years for me to finish a doctorate. So, I skipped graduate school. I applied to the Los Altos Community Center. They offered me $68,000 a year, and I accepted. I waited until 3 days before my start date in August 2019 to tell my parents. We were having dinner, and Natalie was about to start her sophomore year at Stanford. My father asked, "So, Shella, which graduate programs have you applied to?" "I am not going to graduate school," I said. "I got a job at the Los Altos Community Center. I start on Monday." A heavy silence filled the room. My mother lowered her fork. "A job? Doing what?" "Special education. Working with children who have developmental delays." "What does it pay?" $68,000. My father's face turned red, not with anger but with disappointment, which felt far worse. "You threw away a Stanford degree for $68,000. "I am using it," I replied, "just differently." My mother looked at Natalie, then at me. "What are we supposed to tell people? That our daughter is a babysitter?" I did not answer, and I did not need to. The judgment had already been passed. 3 days later, my mother left me a voicemail that I still remember word for word. "Shella, it is Mom, regarding your job. When you are at events with us, please do not mention what you do. Just say you are exploring options. People will not understand." I listened to it twice and deleted it, but every word stayed with me. My first day at the center was September 3, 2019. I had 11 children between the ages of 5 and 9, 7 boys and 4 girls. Every child had some form of developmental delay, including autism, Down syndrome, speech delays, or learning disabilities. None of their families could afford private therapy. I worked one-on-one with each child for 30 minutes, seeing 4 or 5 children every day. The rest of my time was consumed by lesson plans, progress reports, and parent consultations. The pay was low and the hours were long. I came home completely drained every single evening. But by December, 3 of those children were speaking in full sentences. 2 were reading at grade level. 1 learned to write his own name. I never mentioned any of this to my parents, and they never asked. Fast forward to February 2023. A woman named Susan Callahan came to the community center. She was an event planner who coordinated high-end weddings and corporate events. She lived in Los Altos Hills, had a beautiful home, and made an excellent income. She had a 6-year-old son named Jamie who had level 2 autism and was largely nonverbal. He could only say a few words like mom, blue, yes, and no. He could not carry on a conversation, could not read, and struggled to maintain eye contact. Insurance would not cover the intensive therapy he required, and private sessions cost $300 an hour, which Susan could not afford. A neighbor told her about our center, so she called to ask if I could work with Jamie. I agreed. We first met on Tuesday, February 14, 2023, Valentine's Day. I remember clearly because Jamie brought a Valentine's card his teacher had helped him make, featuring a red heart. He handed it to me and said, "Blue." That was his word for everything he liked. I worked with Jamie every Tuesday and Thursday for 3 years. We had 60 sessions the first year, 58 the second, and 56 the third, 174 sessions in total. I never charged Susan a single dollar. At the end of every session, she tried to hand me $50, $20, or whatever she could manage, but I always refused. "Insurance should cover this," I told her. "Since they do not, someone has to." By the third month, Jamie said, "Teacher Shella," clearly pronouncing the words. By the sixth month, he began making eye contact, at first for just a few seconds, then longer. By the second year, he was speaking in 3-word sentences. "I want snack. Read book, please. Mom, pick up." By January 2026, 3 years after we started, Jamie recognized 23 simple words, like cat, dog, mom, blue, and chocolate. On January 15th, he read a full sentence from a picture book. "The cat is blue." The sentence was incorrect. The cat in the book was actually orange. But he tried, sounding out the words. He was reading. Susan cried and hugged me, asking how she could ever thank me. "You do not have to," I said. The secret I kept from Susan, my parents, and everyone else was that Jamie was not the only child I helped. Between 2019 and 2025, I worked with 43 children at the center. I tutored 21 of them completely free of charge. The other 22 families paid on a sliding scale, $20, $50, or $100 a session, depending on what they could manage. Lucia, the girl from 2019, is now an 8th grader. She is an honors student reading at a 10th grade level. Connor, a boy I worked with from 2021 to 2023, is now in the 4th grade and speaks fluently. His father is a director at Google. Ava, a girl who could not even hold a pencil in 2024, now writes complete sentences. Her mother is an attorney. 8 of the families I worked with lived in Los Altos Hills or Palo Alto. These were wealthy families who could easily afford private therapy, but they chose me because their children needed consistency, and I provided sessions in the evenings when the kids were less tired after school. My parents knew nothing about this. I never told them, and they never asked. When Natalie got engaged in November 2025, I kept to myself the fact that the wedding guest list would likely include parents of children I had taught. The engagement dinner took place at the French Laundry in Yountville, costing $850 per person. Austin Reed proposed with a 4-carat diamond ring, and Natalie posted 40 photos on Instagram. Austin is 32 and a venture capitalist at Sequoia Capital. According to his LinkedIn profile, his net worth is around $15 million. He comes from old money in Connecticut. His parents, Thomas and Caroline Reed, run the Peninsula Children's Foundation, which provides $8 million in grants annually to special needs programs. I was familiar with the foundation. 2 years prior, I researched it while looking for funding for the community center. We did not qualify because our center was too small, lacked a board of directors, and did not have a formal nonprofit structure. But I knew the Reeds funded truly meaningful, rigorous, evidence-based intervention work. They were not the type to write checks just for self-flattery. Natalie had no idea I knew about the foundation. She knew next to nothing about my work. When she announced the engagement at Thanksgiving dinner, my mother cried tears of joy. Within 5 minutes, she posted on Facebook, "Our daughter Natalie is engaged to venture capitalist Austin Reed. So proud." I was not tagged, nor was I mentioned. I liked the post and commented, "Congratulations," adding a heart emoji. An hour later, Natalie texted me, "Thanks, Shells. By the way, about the wedding. Mom said it is best if you do not bring a +1. Your work crowd might not really mesh with Austin's circle, you know what I mean?" I replied, "No problem, I do not have anyone to bring anyway." Wedding planning began in December. The venue deposit was $28,500, with a total budget of $118,000. The location was the Rancho Estate in Los Altos Hills, with a capacity for 250 people and a guest list of 200. There were 8 bridesmaids, all of them her colleagues from Google. None were family. I discovered I was not in the bridal party through Instagram. Natalie posted a photo captioned, "My girls," showing 8 women in matching robes. I was nowhere to be seen. I texted her, "The bridesmaids look beautiful." She replied, "Thanks. Austin's family is very traditional. They wanted the bridal party to consist of people who have been part of our journey as a couple. You understand, right?" "Of course," I said. January arrived and the invitations went out. I received mine on January 8th. It was heavy cream-colored cardstock with handwritten calligraphy. The envelope read, "Ms. Mela Conklin, no +1." Inside, the invitation read, "Natalie Conklin and Austin Reed invite you to celebrate their wedding. February 15th at 5 o'clock. Black tie optional." I RSVP'd yes. 2 weeks before the wedding, my mother showed me the seating chart while I was at her house. She had printed it out. There were 25 tables with 8 seats per table. Tables 1 through 20 were for the Google colleagues, venture capitalists, tech executives, Austin's family and friends, distant Conklin relatives, and my parents' friends. Tables 21 through 24 were for additional guests, neighbors, and distant cousins. Table 25 was for children and unclassified family members. My name was at the very bottom, added later in a different font. I looked at the other names at the table: Susan Callahan, Jamie Callahan, and 4 other children aged 6 to 12 from different families. My mother said, "We put you with Susan and her son. Since you work with kids all day anyway, you will feel more comfortable there." I looked at her. "This is the kids' table, the overflow table. I am the only adult family member here." She offered a slight smile. "Someone needs to keep an eye on the kids. Aren't you good with children?" I did not argue. Looking back at the chart, I saw Jamie's name, and an idea formed in my mind. That night, I texted Susan, "Hey, I saw the seating chart. I am at your table. Is Jamie coming?" She replied, "Yes, I did not know you would be there. Jamie will be thrilled to see you." "Perfect," I wrote back. 3 dots blinked on my screen before she sent, "Shella, is everything okay? I know family weddings can be complicated." I replied, "Everything is fine. I actually asked for that table." "You asked for the kids' table?" "Yes." "Why?" I paused for a moment, then typed out my response. "Because I know exactly who else will be sitting there." On February 10th, 5 days before the wedding, my mother called. "Shella, one more thing, about the place cards." "Yes, we are printing professional titles on everyone's card to help people network. I need to know what to print for yours." I knew exactly where this was going. "What is printed on everyone else's?" "Well, Dr. Martinez is a cardiologist, so we printed that. Mr. Cooper is a Google director. Ms. Callahan runs an event planning company. And for me?" Silence stretched over the phone. I was thinking, maybe we just print your name? No title. You are not a doctor, and the word teacher looks, I don't know. Most guests are in tech, medicine, or law. It might look... She left the sentence unfinished. "You can print Ms. Shella Conklin," I said. "No profession." "Are you sure?" "I am sure." "Great, thanks, honey." She hung up. I sat there for 5 minutes, then texted Susan. "Can you do me a favor?" "Anything," she replied. "At the wedding, if Jamie asks me questions, let him. Do not stop him." 3 dots appeared, followed by, "What kind of questions?" I typed, "About what we do together, about learning, about reading." A long pause followed before she wrote, "Shella, what are you planning?" "Nothing," I replied. "I am just tired of hiding." February 15th, the day of the wedding, arrived. I drove 42 minutes alone to the estate from my apartment in Mountain View. I wore a dark blue dress I bought at Nordstrom Rack 2 years ago for $89. It was very simple. I arrived at 3:45 in the afternoon, well before the 5 o'clock ceremony. I came early on purpose to see the setup. The venue was stunning, with rolling hills, oak trees, and string lights everywhere. The ceremony space sat on a lawn overlooking the valley, featuring 200 white chairs, a floral arch, and a string quartet playing Pachelbel. I walked into the reception tent, where white drapery hung from the ceiling alongside Edison bulbs and floral arrangements on every table. Each centerpiece easily cost $800 or $900. I found table 25 in the far right corner near the kitchen entrance. The floral arrangement was smaller than the ones on the other tables. There were 8 place cards. I picked up mine, Ms. Shella Conklin. I looked at the others. Dr. Martinez, cardiologist; Mr. Cooper, Google director; Ms. Susan Callahan, director of Callahan Events; Jamie Callahan. The other 4 were for children aged 6 to 12, showing only their last names without titles. Every single adult had a profession listed, even the parents of those children. Only I did not. I placed the card back on the table, returned to my car, and sat there until 4:50. The ceremony began at 5 o'clock. I sat in row 18 on the bride's side, surrounded by people I did not know. The front rows were filled with Austin's family, refined, quiet, old money. Natalie walked down the aisle at 5:12 in a $12,000 Vera Wang gown. I knew the price because my mother had bragged to me over the phone. Can you believe it? $12,000. Austin's parents paid for it, though. They are so generous. The ceremony lasted 23 minutes. In the crowd, I recognized 6 families whose children I had worked with over the years. None of them came over to speak with me. A few waved and one mouthed hello. I nodded in return. During the vows, I noticed Austin's mother glance back toward my row. Her gaze lingered for a second or two. Her expression was neutral, but there was a flicker of recognition in her eyes, as if she were trying to place me. Then she turned back to the ceremony. The cocktail hour began at 5:30. On the lawn, servers carried appetizers while an open bar operated. I stood near some greenery for 47 minutes and no one spoke to me. I overheard snippets of conversations about IPOs, funding rounds, and stock options. Someone had just completed a Series C round, while someone else had left Meta for a startup. At 6 o'clock, I heard my mother's voice as she introduced Natalie to a group of guests. "This is Natalie, our daughter," she said. "She is a product manager at Google, just promoted to an L6 level. Her total compensation is $340,000. Someone asked, "Do you have other children?" My mother paused. "We have 2 daughters. This is Natalie and, well, Shella is here somewhere too. I am not sure where she went." "What does she do?" Another longer pause followed. "She works with children." The conversation quickly moved on, and I remained standing by the greenery. At 6:28, I saw Susan arrive with Jamie, who was wearing a small navy suit. He looked uncomfortable and kept pulling at his collar. Then he spotted me. His face lit up immediately. "Teacher Shella!" he shouted, running over without any volume control, a common trait for him. Susan followed with a smile. "Hi, Shella. You look beautiful today." Jamie wrapped his arms around my waist. "Teacher Shella, I am wearing a blue tie. Look." He pointed to his tie, which was blue with small dinosaurs on it. "I see it, Jamie. It looks perfect." He grinned. In that moment, I knew my plan would work. At 6:45, a coordinator guided everyone into the reception tent. I walked to table 25. Susan and Jamie were already seated, along with 4 children and 2 parents who looked somewhat confused. One of the parents said to the coordinator, "I think there might be a mistake. This is the kids' table." The coordinator checked the list. "No mistake, this is table 25, the overflow and kids' table." The parent looked at me. "And you are?" "I am the bride's sister," I said. Their faces froze slightly. Oh, they did not ask anything else. I sat next to Jamie with Susan on his other side. The tent hummed as 200 people found their seats. Music played and champagne was poured. At 6:52, I looked toward the head table. My parents sat there with Natalie and Austin in the center, flanked by Austin's parents on one side and my parents on the other. The table really was raised 6 inches above the rest. My mother spotted me, waved, and raised her champagne glass, her third as I had been counting. Then she called out across the room, "Shella, at least you got a plate." She laughed, and people at the front tables joined in with polite, hesitant chuckles. Austin's mother did not laugh. She looked at my mother, then at me. Her expression remained neutral, but her gaze lingered on my mother for several seconds before she turned to whisper something to her husband. Jamie tugged at my sleeve. "Teacher Shella, why is everyone looking?" "They are just excited, buddy." He nodded and pulled out his menu card. It was cream-colored cardstock with elegant calligraphy, listing 3 courses. He pointed to a word, salmon. "Teacher Shella, what is this word?" I leaned in, sounded out. "What is the first letter?" "S." "Good. What sound does S make?" "S." "Right, keep going." "S." "Yes, go on." Man. Salmon, did I get it right?" "Salmon, you got it right." He smiled brightly, full of pride. Susan watched us, her eyes welling with tears. She whispered, "He has never tried to read a menu before." "He is ready," I whispered back. Jamie kept looking, pointing to another word. Choc. "Oh, chocolate," I said. He repeated chocolate. Then he looked up at me with a completely innocent expression, entirely unaware of what was about to happen. Using his usual loud volume, he said, "Teacher Shella, can you teach me to read this menu just like you teach me words at school?" Our table went quiet. Then the neighboring tables fell silent, and soon the quiet spread across the entire tent. It happened quickly, taking only a few seconds. Jamie's voice carried far across the room. His question was loud, clear, and innocent. "Teacher Shella, can you teach me to read this menu just like you teach me words at school?" He continued without any hesitation. "Remember when I couldn't even read the word cat and you helped me and now I can read chocolate?" A dead silence fell over the tent. 200 people stopped talking, eating and moving. Everyone turned around. A few looked at Jamie, but most looked at me. My mother's champagne glass remained suspended mid-air. Austin's mother turned completely around in her chair. I checked my watch. It was 7:18. Susan placed a hand on Jamie's shoulder. "Jamie, honey, Teacher Shella is having dinner." But Jamie was not finished. "Teacher Shella is my teacher. She taught me how to read," he said, as if sharing the best news in the world. 200 people stared at us. Nearly a minute passed, and no one moved. My mother's expression remained frozen, her glass still raised. Then Austin's mother stood up. Caroline Reed walked toward table 25. She moved gracefully, wearing a cream dress and pearls, with every hair in place. She carried herself with the ease of someone accustomed to being noticed. She stopped at our table, looked at Jamie with a gentle smile, and then looked at me. "Excuse me," she said, "you are a teacher?" I nodded. "Special education at the Los Altos Community Center." Her expression shifted to one of clear recognition. "The Los Altos Community Center?" "Yes." She turned to her husband. "Thomas, the Los Altos Community Center, the one on your research list." Thomas Reed stood up, walked over and looked at me. "You work there?" "Yes." He looked at Jamie, then at Susan, and finally back at me. "We have had that center on our research list for 2 years, he said. "Our foundation director mentioned a truly remarkable teacher there, someone specializing in intensive interventions for nonverbal children, who works completely free of charge." He paused. "That is you?" I did not answer because I did not need to. Susan stood up, her voice trembling. "It is her." Susan turned to face the entire tent as 200 people watched. As a professional event planner, she knew how to address a room. Her voice rose clearly. "Ms. Conklin has worked with my son every Tuesday and Thursday for 3 years. When we started, Jamie could barely speak. He is 9 now. He can speak and he can read. He is sitting here tonight entirely because of her." Her voice cracked slightly. "She never charged me a single dollar, not once. Every time I offered to pay, she refused." A brief silence followed. Then, a woman at table 12 stood up. Her name was Sarah Mitchell, the mother of Lucia, the girl I had worked with back in 2019. Sarah's voice was steady and firm. "My daughter Lucia is here tonight as a junior bridesmaid. She is 13. 6 years ago, she could not even say her own name. Ms. Conklin worked with her every day that summer for 2 hours, completely free of charge." She pointed toward table 15. A teenager with long brown hair and a bridesmaid dress stood up and waved at me. "Lucia is in the 8th grade now," Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger. "She is an honors student reading at a 10th grade level. That is entirely due to Ms. Conklin." Another person stood up at table 7. It was David Morrison, a director at Google and Connor's father. "I am a director at Google," he said. "I make $400,000 a year. I can afford the best therapists, top specialists, and the most expensive programs in the Bay Area." He paused. "But when my son Connor was diagnosed with autism in 2021, every private therapist had a 6-month wait list, and every program was full. I was desperate." He looked at me. "Ms. Conklin worked with my son twice a week after her regular hours for 2 years. She only charged me $50 a session, while private therapy started at $300. She told me my son needed consistency, not for me to throw money away." His voice softened. "Connor is in the 4th grade now. He speaks in full sentences and has made friends. He is here tonight, too." He pointed to a table in the back where a boy around 10 years old waved. David looked toward my mother. "You have an extraordinary daughter." A third person stood up. Jennifer Torres, an attorney and Ava's mother. "My daughter can write now, full sentences and paragraphs," she said. "She is only 6. 2 years ago, she could not even hold a pencil. Ms. Conklin taught her at a community center for free because she said every child deserves a chance." Jennifer held up a piece of paper with a crayon drawing on it. "Ava drew this tonight. It says, 'To Teacher Shella, thank you for teaching me.'" She placed the drawing on the table. Silence returned to the room. Then a fourth person stood up, followed by a fifth. By 7:24, 5 families had stood up to share their stories. My mother still had not moved. Caroline Reed turned to face my mother. The tent remained quiet as everyone watched. Caroline's voice was calm and professional. "Mrs. Conklin, our foundation has funded over 50 programs in the last 5 years," she said. "We review hundreds of applications, looking for evidence-based interventions, qualified staff, and measurable results." She paused. "We have spent 3 years looking for someone with Ms. Conklin's dedication and talent." She turned back to me. "Our foundation would love to meet with you. Would you be open to serving as an advisor on our board?" I nodded. It would be an honor. Caroline handed me a business card for the Peninsula Children's Foundation, which operates with an $8 million annual budget. She looked at my mother one last time. "You have an extraordinary daughter, Mrs. Conklin. I hope you realize that." My mother's champagne glass was still suspended in the air. She could not find a single word to say. Natalie began to cry openly. She stood up from the head table and walked toward me, her makeup smudged. She stopped just 3 feet away. "Why didn't you tell us?" I looked at her. "You never asked. All this time, I thought, Mom said you were just—" She broke down, unable to finish her sentence. "I know what Mom said," I replied calmly. "I'm sorry." She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. She held on for 12 seconds. It was the first time we had hugged in 4 years. When she finally pulled back, she whispered, "I just wish I had known sooner." "You could have asked," I said softly. Across the room, my father stood up and started walking toward me. He stopped halfway, his eyes darting between the families who had spoken, Caroline Reed, and me. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Finally, he managed to speak. We didn't know you were doing this kind of work." "I told you 7 years ago," I said, my voice dead even. "You told me I was wasting my degree." He flinched. "I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did." He looked down, unable to hold my gaze. I stood up from my chair. "I need some air." I walked out of the tent, and Jamie followed right behind me. Susan tried to grab his arm, but he slipped past and ran out into the night. "Teacher Shella, wait up," he called out. I stopped and turned around. He threw his arms around me in a tight hug. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked. I knelt down so we were eye to eye. "No, Jamie, you did everything absolutely perfectly." Everyone was staring at us. "I know." "Are you sad?" I smiled at him. "Not at all, I'm not sad." "Are you happy then?" I thought about it for a second. "Yeah, I think I'm really happy." He squeezed me tight one more time. Susan caught up to us, looking breathless. "I am so sorry, Shella. I had no idea he was going to say that." "Don't apologize, you did exactly what I needed." She looked confused. "I asked you not to stop him from asking questions, remember?" A look of realization crossed her face and she nodded slowly. "You planned this whole thing." "I didn't plan it," I told her. "I just decided to stop hiding." At 8:45 p.m. I walked back into the reception area. My parents were standing near the bar. They saw me come in, but they didn't make a move toward me. My father, Richard, stood with his hands deep in his pockets, looking much older and smaller than I remembered. My mother, Diane, held a glass of water instead of her usual champagne, her face completely pale. I walked right past them without stopping. Natalie caught up to me near table 8. "Can we get coffee sometime?" she asked, her voice quiet. "I want to hear about your work, really hear about it." "Sure," I said, "but not this week. I have 11 kids depending on me." She nodded. "I understand." I let the silence stretch for 20 seconds. She just stood there, waiting. "Do you really understand?" I asked. She swallowed hard. "I want to." "Good." I turned and kept walking. By 9:15 p.m., I was gone. The reception was still in full swing, and they hadn't even cut the cake yet. I knew people would notice, and I knew they would gossip about the sister who walked out early on her own sister's wedding. But I didn't care anymore. I had spent 7 years caring about what they thought, and tonight I chose myself. I found Susan and Jamie by the dessert table to say goodbye, giving them both a hug. "Are you leaving?" Jamie asked. "Yeah, will I see you on Tuesday?" "Definitely," he beamed. I walked out to the parking lot, got into my car, and drove the 42 minutes back to Mountain View. The whole way home, my phone buzzed continuously with texts and missed calls. I didn't look at a single one. The next morning, February 16th, I woke up at 6:30 a.m. It was Saturday, and I drove straight over to the Los Altos Community Center. The doors opened at 8 a.m., and all 11 kids were already waiting. Jamie ran right up to me. "Teacher Shella, I read the dessert menu all by myself last night." I knelt down to his level. "Did you really?" "I read chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry." "I am so proud of you," I said, and he gave me a massive hug. Susan was standing nearby and pulled me aside. "Shella, I've already gotten 3 calls this morning. They're all families from the wedding last night, asking if you're taking on new clients." "Really?" "And Caroline Reed's assistant called me at 7 a.m. They want to meet with you next week. They want to discuss funding and expansion for the center to double your capacity." I stood there completely speechless. Susan smiled warmly. "You did it. You didn't let them make you invisible anymore." At 9:15 a.m. during a quick break, I finally checked a voicemail my mother had left at 7:30 a.m. "Shella, it's Mom. We need to talk. Caroline Reed called me this morning. She told me things I didn't know about your work, about the children. I really didn't know. Shella, please call me back." I listened to it twice, hit delete, and never called her back. Around noon, a text came in from Natalie. "Can we please get coffee this week to talk? Really talk." I waited 20 minutes before replying, "Sure, but not this week. I have 11 kids depending on me." She shot back, "I understand. Just let me know when you're free." I didn't reply to that either. For 7 years, I was the one who answered texts instantly, dropped everything the moment the phone rang, and rearranged my entire life to fit their schedule. Never again. By Monday, February 16th, I was right back at the center. It was a standard busy day. 11 kids, 4 one-on-one sessions, and 2 group sessions. During lunch, I sat in my small office looking at a photo on my phone. It was a picture of Jamie at the wedding, staring down at the menu with pure pride on his face. I thought about my mother's champagne glass frozen mid-air. I thought about Caroline Reed's words, "You have an extraordinary daughter." I thought about the 5 families who stood up, validating 7 years of my life's work in just 5 minutes. And I thought about my place card, Ms. Shella Conklin, with no career and no title. The realization hit me clearly. They measured worth by where you sat, how much money you made, and how much bragging material you provided at a dinner party. But I measured my worth by Jamie reading the word chocolate, by Lucia making the honor roll, by Connor speaking in full sentences, by the 18 families who no longer had to choose between paying rent and paying for therapy. They measured value in seating arrangements and paychecks. I measured it in children who could finally read a menu on their own. At 2 p.m., it was time for Jamie's session. He burst through the door holding a copy of Green Eggs and Ham. "Teacher Shella, I brought a book. Let's read it," he cried. "I want to read the whole thing." We sat down together. He opened to the first page, pointing his finger at the very first word. "I am Sam." "Keep going, Sam," I said. He looked up and gave me a massive, bright smile. This was my table. Not table 25 in the corner of a wedding tent, not the overflow table for extra relatives. This room with 11 kids who needed me, and the parents who trusted me, was where the real work happened. Jamie read 3 entire pages without a single bit of help. When he finished, he looked up at me. "Teacher Shella, did I do good?" "You did perfectly," I told him. 3 weeks later, on Friday night, February 28th, I sat in my apartment writing all of this down because I wanted to remember it exactly as it happened. I don't want to remember the slights, the frozen champagne glass, or the bare place card. I want to remember Jamie's question. I want to remember the crack in Susan's voice. I want to remember the 5 families who stood up for me. I want to remember the 43 seconds my mother stood completely frozen. Because that was the exact moment I stopped being invisible. It wasn't because I picked a fight, or screamed, or demanded respect. It was because a 9-year-old boy asked me to teach him how to read a menu, and the truth did the rest of the talking. If you have ever been told your work doesn't matter just because it doesn't come with a massive paycheck, I see you. If you have ever been pushed to the edge of the room because you chose purpose over prestige, I see you. Draw a line in the sand. Just once this week, choose yourself. And remember this. People can assign you whatever seat they want. They can leave your career off a place card, and they can introduce you without a single title. But they cannot erase the impact of what you have built. They cannot make the children who learned to speak fall silent again. They cannot erase the families who will gladly stand up to defend you. And they cannot freeze the moment a 9-year-old boy asks a question that changes absolutely everything. I sat at table 25 with a 9-year-old, an event planner, and 4 small kids. My card just said Ms. Shella Conklin, nothing more. My mother waved from the head table and said, "At least you got a plate." But when that 9-year-old boy asked his question, 200 guests turned around to look at my mother, and she froze solid. I counted 43 seconds, and in that moment I finally realized I was never the family embarrassment. I was the one who proved herself. My name is Dana Myers. I am 26 years old. For as long as I can remember, I have been the outsider in my own family, the one who never quite fit in. But this past Thanksgiving, in front of 25 relatives, surrounded by the smell of roasted turkey and the glint of Waterford crystal, my own mother stood up, looked me dead in the eye, and said with a sneer, "It's time for the truth, Dana. You were never supposed to be a part of this family." My sister, Stephanie, raised her glass and slowly started clapping. My father just nodded along in silence. A suffocating quiet fell over the room until my 82-year-old grandfather, who was in the final stages of terminal cancer, sitting at the head of the long table in an old Brooks Brothers suit, slammed his fist down so hard the crystal shattered. "Enough!" His voice cut through the air like a blade. "The truth has nothing to do with Dana. The truth, Victoria, is about you." He slid a thick manila envelope across the table. What was inside would completely destroy everything my mother and sister had spent 26 years building. That night, they thought they were erasing me from the family line for good. What they didn't know was that they were the ones who were about to be erased. If this story of family betrayal, hidden greed, and a dying grandfather's final stand for justice strikes a chord with you, take a brief second to like and subscribe. Only do it if it truly resonates. Leave a comment with your city and the exact time you are watching this. I read every single one. Now let me take you back to how this nightmare actually started. I was born on March 15th, 1999. My sister Stephanie is 3 years older, born on June 12th, 1996. We grew up in a 6,200 square foot colonial home in Greenwich, Connecticut. Old money, old furniture, old rules. My father, Patrick, was an estate planning attorney at Myers and Whitfield in Hartford. My mother, Victoria, was a charity event coordinator. On paper, we were the picture-perfect family. But I learned very early on that perfection came with a seating arrangement. Stephanie always had the larger bedroom, 14 by 16 feet with a bay window overlooking the gardens. Mine was 10 by 12 feet facing the driveway. When I asked my mother why at 10 years old, she smiled and said, "Stephanie needs more space, sweetheart. She's the eldest. She has responsibilities." I didn't understand what that meant. For Stephanie's 16th birthday, there were 30 guests, a live band, and a custom cake from the best bakery in Greenwich. For my 16th, there were 4 people and a plain sheet cake from Stop and Shop. I told myself it was fine, that parents have favorites, and it was just normal. When Stephanie turned 18, my dad bought her a BMW 328i with a red ribbon on the hood. When I turned Peace 18, I bought a 2012 Honda Civic with money I saved from working a summer job at the library. But the real divide happened in 2017, college. Stephanie went to Yale, fully paid for, $54,000 a year covered by the family. I got into UConn, and my parents agreed to contribute only $12,000, leaving me to take out loans for the rest. By the time I graduated in 2021, I carried $71,000 in student debt. When I asked my dad why the support was so different, he looked over his reading glasses and said, "Yale is a family tradition, Dana. UConn is a fine school. You'll do great." When I asked my mother, she said, "Some investments make more sense than others." I thought she meant Stephanie was smarter. I didn't know she meant Stephanie was the one worth protecting. Every Thanksgiving, the seating chart was exactly the same. Grandpa Edmund sat at the head of the 14-foot mahogany table. Stephanie sat to his right, the position of honor. Mom sat to his left, and Dad took the third seat. Aunts, uncles, and cousins filled the middle, and I sat in seat 12 at the very end, right next to the kitchen door. In 2019, Grandpa asked my mother, "Why is Dana always stuck at the end?" Mom smiled smoothly and said, "She prefers it there. It gives her more privacy." Grandpa didn't say anything, but I noticed a shift in his eyes. From that day on, he started watching me differently. When I was 18, I finally asked the question I had been avoiding for years. We were driving back to UConn from Greenwich in my mother's Mercedes E-Class, and I was staring out the window. "Mom," I said, "why don't I look like anyone else in the family?" She glanced at me. "What do you mean? You have blonde hair, your dad has dark brown hair. Stephanie looks just like you." "I have deep red hair and brown eyes. I look nothing like any of you." Mom laughed, a light, dismissive sound. "Genetics are a funny thing, Dana. My grandmother had red hair. Some questions are better left unasked." I dropped it, but I shouldn't have. I let it go, but the question remained like a splinter. Small, hidden, yet impossible to ignore. Every family photo on the mantelpiece showed the same truth. Stephanie's blonde hair caught the light exactly like Mom's, and Dad's sharp jawline was mirrored perfectly in her features. I always stood slightly apart, my deep red hair looking like a warning sign. I used to spend nights staring at those pictures, wondering if I was adopted, if I was a mistake, or worse, if I simply didn't belong. As I grew older, I noticed more details that everyone else seemed to ignore. Mom's hugs for Stephanie lasted 3 seconds longer than her hugs for me. Dad laughed louder at Stephanie's jokes. My report cards earned a polite "good job," while Stephanie's brought proud praise and a new credit card. I told myself it was just birth order. The oldest gets the spotlight, the youngest gets the scraps. But deep down, I knew it ran deeper. If you have ever felt like the outsider in your own family, watching everyone else from behind a glass wall, leave your city and the exact time in the comments. I read every single one, and I promise you are not alone in this. Now let me fast forward to the phone call that shattered that glass wall completely. On October 15th, 2025, I received the call that changed everything. It was 3:22 p.m., and I was sitting in a Starbucks on Greenwich Avenue, barely touching my grande latte, when my phone buzzed. It was Dad. His voice was unsteady. "It's Grandpa, stage 4 pancreatic cancer. They're saying weeks, maybe 2 months at most." The air left my lungs. "Grandpa." "Yes, we need to prepare. Legally, emotionally, financially." The word financially hung in the air a bit longer than it should have. 2 days later, Patrick called a family meeting at the house in Greenwich. The stated topic was Grandpa's care plan, but the real topic was the estate. We sat in my dad's home office with its cherry wood desk, leather chairs, and stacks of folders labeled estate planning. Stephanie leaned forward. "We need to be realistic. If Grandpa's assets get tied up in probate or contested, it could take years." Mom looked at me. "For his sake, we all need to be on the same page." I noticed a folder labeled contingency, but I couldn't see what was inside. The following night at 7:55 p.m., Stephanie called me. "Listen, Dana," she said. "I know this is tough, but have you thought about stepping away from the inheritance? You're young. You have your whole life ahead of you. Mom and I have been handling the family finances for years. It would just be cleaner this way." The call lasted 11 minutes and 32 seconds. I recorded it. After too many times of people denying what they said later, I had started recording important calls. "I'll think about it," I told her. I lied. Between November 1st and November 26th, Stephanie called me 9 times. Every call followed the same pattern: casual small talk, followed by a pivot to the estate. On November 11th, during the 5th call, she asked, "Have you talked to Dad about the trust structures? I just think, given your student loans, maybe a lump sum buyout would be better for you than an annual distribution." I kept a log. 9 calls, totaling 1 hour and 23 minutes. 7 out of the 9 mentions were about me stepping aside or simplifying the process. In the 9th call, Stephanie said something that chilled me. "We're just trying to protect you, Dana, from what's coming." On November 8th, Mom invited me to lunch, which was incredibly rare. We met at the Ginger Man in Greenwich. She ordered the salmon, and I ordered a salad I barely touched. Midway through the meal, Mom leaned back. "Have you ever been curious about your biological background? I mean, truly curious, because if you ever wanted to do one of those DNA tests, like 23andMe, I would completely understand." The bill came to $68.50, and she paid with her Amex Centurion card. We left at 1:40 p.m. She was planting a seed, and I just didn't know she was planting it in a minefield. Dad canceled 2 dinners with me, on November 10th and November 17th. Both times, he texted 2 hours before, "Sorry, Dana. Client emergency. Can we reschedule? Busy with Grandpa's estate stuff. Next one's on me." Both times, I was already driving down to Greenwich and had to turn back. I found out later there was no client emergency. He was meeting with Stephanie and Mom. The seeds she planted began to grow rapidly. Every night after that lunch, I lay in bed, replaying her words over and over. "Have you ever been curious about your biological background?" That wasn't a casual question. It was a warning wrapped in fake concern. Meanwhile, Stephanie's calls grew more frequent and insistent. During the 7th call, I was grocery shopping. Her voice was sweet as honey. "Dana, honey, I'm just looking out for you. With Grandpa's health, the trust is going to get incredibly complicated. Maybe a clean break would give you freedom. No strings, no family drama." I pushed my cart down the cereal aisle, keeping my voice steady. "I'll think about it." But my hands shook so hard I dropped a box of pasta. From that point on, I documented every interaction, not because I didn't trust her, but because I finally understood that I couldn't. On Thanksgiving Eve, Mom sent the text again. "Dress appropriately tomorrow. The whole family will be watching." I stared at the screen until it went black. My stomach knotted up. I had a sickening feeling that whatever was coming wasn't just about Grandpa's money, it was about wiping me out completely, politely, and in front of everyone who mattered. If this kind of slow-burn family pressure feels familiar to you, hit that like button right now. It helps the channel more than you know. And if you have your own "we need to talk about the estate" story, share it in the comments. I read every single one. On November 22nd, Stephanie sent me an email. Subject: Thanksgiving seating arrangements. "Dana, you're at the far end near the kitchen door. Since you're the youngest, it's easier for you to help with serving. Grandpa specifically asked for me to be close to him for health reasons. Thanks for understanding." I replied with a single word. Okay. The night before Thanksgiving, Mom texted me, "Dress appropriately tomorrow. The whole family will be watching." I stared at that message for 10 minutes. The whole family will be watching. Not, "We can't wait to see you," or "Looking forward to tomorrow." Just a cold reminder that I was under scrutiny. Thanksgiving Day was Thursday, November 27th, 2025. I arrived at Grandpa's house in Darien at 4:50 p.m. It was a 4,800 square foot Tudor home built in 1962, and the smell of turkey, chestnut stuffing, and cranberry sauce drifted out the front door. Grandpa answered, "Dana, right on time, come in, sweetie." His voice was gentle, but there was a firm, steady look in his eyes. I wore a navy blue dress, the kind Mom considered appropriate. Grandpa wore his gray Brooks Brothers suit from 1987, pressed perfectly, along with his 1992 Rolex day date. As I walked into the living room, I saw Mom and Stephanie whispering in the corner. They stopped talking the moment they saw me. By 6 p.m., all 25 guests were seated. Grandpa sat at the head of the 14-foot mahogany table. Stephanie sat to his right, Mom to his left, and Dad took seat 3. Aunts, uncles, and cousins filled seats 4 through 11. And I sat in seat 12, at the very end near the kitchen door. My cousin Jennifer leaned over and whispered, "Why are you always stuck at the end?" I smiled back. Family tradition, I guess. The table was set with Lenox china, Waterford crystal glasses etched with an M monogram, and white linen napkins embroidered with Myers 1961. I noticed Mom kept checking her watch, 6:10, 6:12, 6:14 p.m., as if waiting for a specific moment. At 6:15 p.m., Mom stood up. She tapped her glass with a fork, and the room grew quiet. "I need to say a few words," she began. "Before we give thanks, we need to face the truth. This family has always been built on honesty, legacy, and bloodline." She paused, looking directly at me. "Dana, you were never supposed to be a part of this family. I have carried a mistake for 26 years because I had no choice, because I was young, and because I was trapped. But now, given Dad's condition, we can't keep pretending. I'm sorry, sweetie, but you're not one of us." A dead silence fell over the 25 people in the room. No one spoke. I looked around. My 63-year-old Aunt Mary stared down at her plate. My 58-year-old Uncle Thomas looked out the window. Cousin Jennifer covered her mouth with a napkin. I looked at Stephanie, who wasn't surprised at all. She was smiling. I looked at Dad, who couldn't meet my eyes and just nodded in silence. "So you waited until now?" I said, my voice flat and cold in front of everyone. Mom's expression softened into a look of feigned pity. "You deserve to know the truth. We all have a right to know." I was just about to stand up and leave when Grandpa slammed his fist on the table. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. 3 Waterford crystal glasses tipped over, shattering on the Lenox plates. $380 apiece, gone instantly. "Enough!" The word cut through the air. Grandpa's voice wasn't loud, but it was freezing. "The truth has nothing to do with Dana. The truth, Victoria, is about you." He pushed a manila envelope across the table. It was 2 inches thick, labeled in blue ink. Evidence, do not open until November 27th, 2025. "Inside this folder," Grandpa said, his voice entirely steady, "is a DNA test report, a private investigator's log, 16 emails between you and Richard Harrington, and a canceled check for $85,000. The room seemed to freeze. Mom's face lost all color instantly. The silence in the dining room felt heavier than any quiet I had ever experienced. 25 pairs of eyes darted between Mom, Grandpa, and me. Aunt Mary's fork remained suspended midair, and Uncle Thomas looked like he wanted to sink into his chair and vanish. Even the turkey on the table seemed to stop steaming. Grandpa didn't raise his voice because he didn't need to. His cancer-stricken body might have been failing, but his mind was sharper than ever. "You want to talk about the truth, Victoria?" he continued, his tone low and even. "Let's talk about your 9-month affair while you were still pretending to be a loyal wife. Let's talk about how you used an innocent baby as a shield for 26 years, so Patrick would never question the family trust fund set up for you." He pushed the envelope closer to me. For the first time that night, his eyes met mine, holding a look of quiet pride I had waited a lifetime to see. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. It wasn't time yet, not in front of the woman who spent a lifetime treating me like a secret she had to hide. If you're sitting there with your heart pounding as fast as mine was in that moment, pause this video, take a deep breath, and hit subscribe. A story like this only gets more intense from here. Grandpa looked around the table, his hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from anger. "You want to talk about truth?" he said. "Then let's talk about truth." Grandpa opened the folder, his hands steadying. The first document he pulled out was a stapled 6-page packet, a lab report. "This," he said, "is a paternity test. Dana's DNA against Patrick's. I paid for it myself in July 2018. Dana's sample was collected from a hairbrush at Christmas in 2017. Patrick's came from a coffee cup." He read aloud from the report. "Probability of paternity, 0.00%. Patrick Myers is not the biological father of Dana." The words landed heavily. Dad's face turned gray as he looked at Mom. "You told me, so that means—" Grandpa cut him off. "Victoria had an affair. The question was, with whom?" He pulled out the second document, a professionally bound 38-page packet. "This is a private investigator's report. I hired Jameson Cole in August 2018. A former FBI agent, cost me $28,000. He tracked Victoria's movements from June 1998 to March 1999. Grandpa turned to page 12. Victoria had a 9-month affair with Richard Harrington, a wealthy hedge fund manager who was one of Patrick's clients. They met at a charity gala on June 6, 1998. The relationship ended on March 22, 1999, exactly 3 days after Dana was born. I felt the room tilt. Stephanie whispered, "You've known for 7 years?" Grandpa ignored her and pulled out a thumb drive. This drive contains 89 emails between Victoria and Richard Harrington from 1998 to 2006, including one from April 20, 1999. He unfolded a printed email highlighted in yellow. From v.myers1972@aol.com to r.harrington@hedge.com. Date, April 20, 1999, 11:32 p.m. Subject, our arrangement. He read it aloud. "Richard, I need the $85,000 we discussed. This has to end cleanly. Patrick can never find out. If he discovers the affair, I lose the family trust fund set up for me. $4.2 million. Wire it by Friday. I will do everything I can to make the mistake disappear." V. A suffocating silence followed. Mom stood up, her voice sharp. "This is private. You have no right." Grandpa cut her off. "I have every right. I'm the one who paid for your lies." He pulled out the final piece of evidence, a clear, undeniable copy of a canceled check for $85,000 from Richard Harrington, payable to Victoria Myers, dated April 22, 1999. The memo line read, "Personal settlement." For the first time that night, Dad's voice cracked. "You took $85,000 from him?" Grandpa looked around the table, his voice dropping to a quiet, deadly tone. "Why did I wait 7 years? Because I wanted to see what kind of people you would become. I wanted to see if Victoria would ever tell the truth on her own. I wanted to see if Patrick would stand up for Dana. I wanted to see if Stephanie could treat her sister with any decency." He looked at each of them in turn. "And tonight, you proved to me that for the sake of money, you would try to erase her in front of the whole family." His voice trembled slightly. "Dana is innocent. She didn't ask to be born, and none of this is her fault. But you, Victoria, used her as a shield and a bumper for 26 years. He pushed the envelope toward me. "This is what I kept for 7 years, waiting for the right moment, waiting for you to show your true colors. And tonight, you did." At 7:18 p.m., Mom stood up without a word, grabbed her Hermes Birkin bag, and walked out the front door. Her Mercedes S-Class drove down the driveway at exactly 7:34 p.m. She didn't return that night, the next day, or ever again. At 7:22 p.m., Stephanie ran upstairs to the second-floor bathroom and locked the door. I could hear her crying through the wood. 23 minutes later, she emerged with smudged mascara and red eyes. "I didn't know about the affair," she said. "I swear, Mom just told me you weren't Dad's biological child. I thought—" "You thought what?" I said, my voice like ice. "Thought that gave you permission to treat me like garbage?" She opened her mouth to speak, but I turned and walked away. Between 7:30 and 8 p.m., 12 of the 25 guests left, muttering excuses about not feeling well, family matters, or early mornings. By 8:15 p.m., only 8 people remained: me, Grandpa, Dad, Stephanie, and 4 close relatives who didn't know where else to go. At 9:45 p.m., Dad sat in Grandpa's study calling his divorce attorney. Standing outside the room, I could hear his voice through the cracked door. "I need a divorce lawyer, as soon as possible. No, it can't wait until Monday because my wife just admitted to a 26-year lie in front of my entire family." He saw me standing there, said nothing, and simply nodded. At 11:52 p.m., Grandpa called me into his study and handed me a small brass key. "Safe deposit box," he said. "Hartford Bank, number 1829. Your name is already on it. Everything you need is inside." I gripped the cold, heavy key. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. Grandpa looked at me, his eyes tired but clear. "Because I needed to know who they were and who you were. Now I know." On November 28th at 10 a.m., I drove to the Hartford Bank at 320 Pearl Street. The bank representative, Nancy Bradford, was a kind-eyed 54-year-old woman. "Mr. Myers added your name to this box in July 2018, she said. "He told me that when you were ready, you would come." Down in the vault, safe deposit box 1829 measured 10 by 10 by 24 inches. I opened it to find everything I needed. The original DNA test report from Gantest Labs in Boston, dated July 18, 2018. The professionally bound 38-page private investigator's report by Jameson Cole. A thumb drive labeled Victoria Richard Correspondence, containing 89 emails. 4 cassette tapes containing recorded conversations from 1999. An 8-page letter handwritten by Grandpa, dated November 20, 2025, a week before Thanksgiving. A property deed for a cabin in Stowe, Vermont, valued at $380,000. Stock certificates for 1,200 shares of Apple stock, worth roughly $234,000. And a document I didn't expect, a payable on death, POD account certification from Hartford Bank, account number 482902, naming Dana Elizabeth Myers as the beneficiary for the purpose of clearing student loan debt, totaling $85,000. Sitting in my car, I read Grandpa's letter, written in slightly shaky blue ink. On page 2, "I first suspected something was wrong on your 10th birthday. Victoria treated you like a burden instead of a daughter. I asked Patrick if everything was okay, and he said, 'She's just stressed.' But I saw the truth. It was guilt." On page 4, when you graduated high school in 2017, you gave a speech about integrity. You said, "Truth is the only legacy that matters." That was when I knew you were the only one worth saving. On page 6, in 2018, I ran the DNA test behind your back. I am sorry for that, but I needed proof before taking action. The results broke my heart, not because you weren't Patrick's daughter, but because I realized what Victoria had done. She used you as a shield, a prop, and an insurance policy. On page 7, in 2023, I set up the POD account with $85,000, the exact amount Victoria took from Richard. It's clean money, free and clear. The executor can release it immediately after I pass. No probate, no waiting, no strings attached. On page 8, "Dana, you owe them nothing. Not your forgiveness, not your company, and not your silence. The cabin in Vermont is yours, the stock is yours. And when I am gone, the truth will be yours too. My only request is this: live freely, live honestly, and build a life they could never touch." Grandfather Edmund, November 20th, 2025. I sat in the parking lot and cried for 20 minutes. The letter was more than words on paper. It was the first time in 26 years that someone in my family had chosen me without hesitation. Grandpa had noticed the exact moment he realized the truth. My 10th birthday party, when Mom forgot the candles, leaving Stephanie to blow out the ones on her own cake. He had seen every slight, every cold shoulder, and every time I was pushed to the edge of the table, both literally and figuratively. I sat in the heated car, reading those 8 pages 3 times over. Each page felt like Grandpa reaching across the boundaries of his own mortality to give me the validation I had spent my life craving. When I finally called him, his voice was weaker than the day before, but firm with resolve. "Come see me, sweetie. We don't have much time." I drove straight back to Darien that afternoon. The house now smelled heavily of hospice care, antiseptics mixed with the strong scent of flowers trying to cover up the smell of an impending goodbye. But Grandpa's eyes still lit up when I walked in. We spent the next 5 days talking about everything he had kept inside for 7 years. He told me about my biological grandmother, Catherine, and how she would have loved me fiercely. He made me promise that I would never apologize for existing. If you have ever had a grandparent who truly saw you when no one else would, comment Grandpa below. I read every single one. November 30th, I drove 4.5 hours to the cabin in Stowe, Vermont. Located at 482 Mountain Road, it was an 1,800-square-foot cedar structure built in 1978, featuring a stone fireplace and mountain views. A guest registry sat on the coffee table, with the final entry dated October 15, 2025, the day of his diagnosis. One last visit before the diagnosis. If you are reading this, Dana, it is yours now. Make it a home. I stayed there for 2 nights before driving back to Connecticut to see Grandpa one last time. From December 1st to December 5th, I stayed at Grandpa's house in Darien as his health declined rapidly. The cancer had spread, and his pain medication was increased. On December 1st, a hospice nurse named Barbara Chen began 24-hour care. By December 3rd, Grandpa was lucid for a brief period and asked if I had seen the cabin. I did, I replied. It's perfect. He nodded. Good, that is your sanctuary now. Go there when the outside noise gets too loud. On December 4th, he slept through the day as his morphine drip was adjusted. At 2:30 a.m. on December 5th, I sat by his bed holding his hand. At 4:16 a.m., he opened his eyes one last time and whispered, Dana, you're going to be okay, sweetie. Better than okay. You are free now. He paused, his breathing shallow. I love you, and I am so proud of you. I replied, I love you too, Grandpa. At 4:18 a.m., he closed his eyes, and Barbara confirmed his peaceful, painless passing. I was the only one by his side. Victoria never visited once during those final 5 days, nor did Stephanie. Dad came by once, stayed for 10 minutes, and left. I called Dad at 4:30 a.m. and he answered on the 7th ring. Hello? He's gone, I said. After a 10-second silence, he responded, I'll call the funeral home. That was it. No tears, no mourning, just cold arrangements. On December 18, 2025, at 2 p.m., we gathered in a conference room overlooking the Connecticut River on the 12th floor of Myers & Whitfield at 250 Constitution Plaza in Hartford. The estate attorney, Eleanor Pritchard, was a sharp 61-year-old woman in a gray suit and reading glasses. Thank you all for coming, she began. We are here for the reading of the last will and testament of Edmund Charles Miles, signed and notarized on November 21, 2025. We sat around a 14-foot cherry wood table. Me, Victoria, Patrick, Stephanie, Eleanor, and 2 junior associates. Victoria sat directly across from me, avoiding my gaze just as she had done since Thanksgiving. Eleanor opened the document and read, To my daughter-in-law, Victoria Lynn Myers, I leave nothing. The reasons are documented in Exhibit A, a sealed letter to be opened by Victoria alone, outlining 27 years of behavior, betrayal, and manipulation. She knows what she did. She will receive $0, 0 property, and no access to the family trusts. A junior associate handed Victoria a cream envelope sealed with an M-stamped wax impression. Her hands shook as she stared at it without opening it. Eleanor continued, To my granddaughter, Stephanie Ann Myers, I leave a total sum of $250,000, distributed as a one-time payment, contingent on her signing a no-contest clause, agreeing not to challenge this will. I leave this money out of legal obligation, not love. She enabled her mother's cruelty, which is unforgivable. Stephanie whispered, That's it? Eleanor did not answer. To my son, Patrick Edmund Myers, I leave $1.2 million and a 40% partner share in Myers & Whitfield, under one condition. He must file for divorce from Victoria Myers within 60 days of my passing. If he fails to do so, the inheritance is forfeited and transfers to Dana. Patrick tolerated cowardice, and I am giving him one final chance to choose integrity. Patrick looked at Victoria, then at me, and lowered his head. Eleanor turned the page. To my granddaughter, Dana Elizabeth Myers, I leave the following assets. First, a trust fund of $1.1 million managed by Fidelity Investments, with annual distributions of $55,000 starting on her 27th birthday. Second, real estate. The cabin at 482 Mountain Road in Stowe, Vermont, valued at $380,000, along with all furnishings and contents. Third, personal property. The jewelry collection of my late wife, Catherine, valued at $190,000, including her diamond engagement ring, sapphire necklace, and pearl earrings. Fourth, debt cancellation. Full payment of Dana's student loan debt, totaling $83,200 in principal and accrued interest, paid directly to the lenders within 30 days via the established POD account. Fifth, a stock portfolio. 1,200 shares of Apple stock, currently valued around $234,000. The total value is approximately $2,087,200. Eleanor paused and looked up. Finally, she said, there is a personal note from Mr. Myers. She read it slowly. Dana is the only grandchild who chose truth over greed, integrity over convenience, and grace over cruelty. She is the only one worthy of the Myers name. To the rest of the room, you had 26 years to do the right thing. You chose silence, you chose money, you chose pride. And now, you have nothing. Eleanor closed the folder, and a long silence filled the room. She looked toward Victoria, her tone quiet and firm. Mr. Myers made his intentions perfectly clear, and he was of sound mind. This will is ironclad. On December 22nd, just 4 days after the reading of the will, Victoria filed for divorce in the Connecticut Superior Court. Case number L-2025-00009832. Petitioner, Victoria Lynn Myers. Reason, irreconcilable differences. She demanded an equitable distribution of the marital assets, completely forgetting that the family trust was never considered marital property. Without the marriage, she had absolutely nothing left. By late December, the story started leaking out. On December 28th, my cousin Thomas posted a vague status on Facebook about family lies. He deleted it 3 hours later, but screenshots were already circulating. By January 2nd, a Greenwich gossip blog picked it up under the headline, Scandal in a Prominent Family. On January 5th, the compliance team at Merrill Lynch flagged Stephanie's name during a reputational risk assessment. On January 8th, Stephanie received her termination letter. At 7:48 p.m. that night, she sent me an email. Subject, I know you won't read this, Dana. They fired me today. Misconduct. They didn't say it outright, but I know it's because the Thanksgiving story leaked. I'm a liability now. I am so sorry for everything. I know it's too late for this, but I'm sorry. Steph. I read the email at 9:03 p.m. and never replied. At 9:05 p.m., I blocked her email address. On January 10th, Richard Harrington pulled all of his accounts from Myers and Whitfield. He sent a brief email to Patrick. Subject, termination of services. Patrick, given recent events and the public nature of your family situation, I have decided to move my hedge fund accounts to Cravath. Effective immediately. This isn't personal, it's strictly business. R.H. $12.3 million in portfolio assets, gone instantly. That single account brought in $1.9 million in annual fees, representing 34% of the firm's total revenue. Patrick's partner equity value plummeted 28% overnight. I heard through a cousin that Patrick called Richard 5 times. Richard never picked up. On the 6th attempt, Richard's assistant answered and said, Mr. Harrington has no further comment. On January 12th, I received a check in the mail for $83,200 from Hartford Bank, check number 6182. The memo line read, POD distribution per account terms. It was the account Grandpa had established 2 years before his death, well before his diagnosis and long before that Thanksgiving dinner. He knew I would need it. I deposited the check using mobile banking, and it cleared on January 14th. On January 16th, I logged into my Navient student loan account. The balance displayed 0. For the first time in 8 years, I didn't owe a single dollar to anyone. On January 15th, I drove past the Greenwich house one last time. A prominent for sale sign stood on the front lawn. 6,200 square feet of lies, completely empty at last. The next day, January 16th, I made a definitive choice. I blocked Victoria's number, I blocked Stephanie's number, and I blocked their emails. I unfollowed them on every single social media platform. I didn't block my dad, but I placed his alerts on Do Not Disturb. Since the reading of the will, he had sent 4 text messages. On December 18th, I'm so sorry. On December 21st, I should have protected you. On December 28th, I am sorry. And on January 4th, can we talk? I replied to only one, the text from December 21st. I wrote back, I know, I never responded to the others. I didn't owe them my company, my forgiveness, or a place in my life ever again. Cutting them off felt like dropping a heavy weight I had carried for so long I had forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. There were no more midnight texts from my mother pretending everything was fine, no more passive-aggressive memes about family loyalty from Stephanie, and no more awkward greetings from my dad that really just meant, please don't embarrass the firm any further. For the first time, my phone was entirely quiet, and that quiet felt exactly like freedom. On January 20th, I received a message through Eleanor Pritchard. Richard Harrington wanted to meet. I agreed to a single meeting in a public place for a maximum of 20 minutes. At 3 p.m., we met at the Starbucks on Greenwich Avenue. Richard was 62 years old, with silver hair, a Patek Philippe watch, and a tailored cashmere coat. He sat down across from me. I didn't stand up, and I didn't shake his hand. Thank you for meeting me, he said. I know you were under no obligation to do so. You have 15 minutes left, I told him. I want to apologize for everything, for the affair, for not stepping up, and for the money. You mean the $85,000 you paid my mother to make me go away? He paused. It wasn't like that. That is exactly what it was. You paid her to hide me and protect your own reputation. She used that money to buy herself a comfortable lifestyle, while I grew up constantly wondering why my own mother couldn't bear to look at me. I didn't know she had. You chose not to know. There is a difference. A heavy silence fell over the table for 8 seconds before he finally said, You're right. I chose not to know. I was a coward. And I still am. Is that everything? I asked. No, I want to know if there is anything I can do to make this right. Anything at all. No. You can't undo 26 years of life. You can't give me back a childhood where I felt wanted. You just can't. I paused, looking him directly in the eyes. Actually, there is one thing. He leaned forward. Anything. Stay away from me. Don't contact me. Don't write letters, and don't try to make amends. I don't need your guilt. I don't need your money, and I don't need you. I stood up from the table. We're done here. The entire meeting lasted exactly 18 minutes and 12 seconds. Richard left his business card on the table with a handwritten note on the back. If you ever change your mind. I left the card right there on the wood and walked out without looking back. That meeting with Richard Harrington was brief, but it closed a chapter of my life I had never asked to participate in. As I stepped out of the Starbucks into the crisp Greenwich air, a powerful realization hit me. I didn't need his apology, his money, or anyone else's guilt. I only needed the truth Grandpa had given me. On January 18th, I drove back to Vermont and spent 10 days at the cabin, staying until January 28. The space smelled of cedar and wood smoke, and the fireplace worked perfectly. The view was exactly what Grandpa had promised, an endless expanse of snow-covered mountains. There was no noise, no lies, just complete peace. I opened the jewelry box Grandpa left me, looking at my grandmother Catherine's collection, the 1892 diamond engagement ring, the 1920s sapphire necklace, and the pearl earrings. On a shelf, I discovered a photo album Grandpa had kept, filled with pictures of me from the day I was born up until 2024. Beneath every single photo, he had written the same caption in his own hand. My true granddaughter. I spent 4 hours every day writing in my journal, and I hiked 2 trails, Stowe Pinnacle and Sterling Pond. For 3 full days, I didn't check my phone at all. By the 4th night, sitting next to the crackling fire, I realized something important. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just tired and finally ready to let it all go. On January 31st, I sat on the porch of the Vermont cabin. The air was freezing, and the mountains were buried under a thick blanket of white snow. I opened Grandpa's letter one last time, turning to the final line on page 8. You are free now. Not because of the money, but because you know the truth. I carefully folded the paper, slid it back into its envelope, and looked out over the mountains. Thank you, Grandpa, I said softly into the cold air. I'm free. It has been 2 months since that Thanksgiving dinner. My mother lost everything she fought for. My sister lost her career. My father lost his most valuable client. And me? I am sitting in my own cabin in Vermont, completely debt-free. I have a secure trust fund, and I possess the jewelry of a grandmother who would have loved me. But more importantly than any of that, I have the absolute truth. Grandpa used to say, the only legacy that matters is integrity. He was right. Blood doesn't make you family, and neither does money. The only thing that truly matters is who chooses to stand by you when the wealth and the masks are stripped away. On that Thanksgiving night, when the masks finally came off, I saw everyone for exactly who they were. Mom chose greed, Stephanie chose convenience, Dad chose silence, and Grandpa? Grandpa chose me. If this story struck a chord with you, if it reminded you that the truth always surfaces in the end, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Because somewhere out there, someone is sitting at the very end of the family table, and they need to know that they aren't the problem. The people around them are.